So I really was looking at all these biases, really simple ones. Time, distance is another one. You know, the idea that and it's really sounds stupid, but digital technology is really good for long distance communication, really bad for up close communication. Turns out people looking at each other with their mirror neurons and their pupils getting bigger and smaller and all that other 93% of human communication that's nonverbal, that's really cool stuff. You know, and to talk up close to people through digital devices turns out to be biased against the medium. It seems obvious, right? But we don't actually respect that rule. I've been to universities where they have kids come into the classroom and log into Second Life and do their classroom virtually in the same room with one another and put pictures of that on their course catalog to show how well they use technology. Right? So there's a bunch of them. I mean, the one that's most interesting for us would probably be this scale, this one size does not fit all. I mean, that's what people are talking about here today. This idea that we have an internet that attempts to aggregate everything that happens. You know, we look at, and smart people like Tim O'Reilly and John Patel talk about the aggregator as the one who wins. That you don't want to be selling books, you want to be the one who's the aggregator of the booksellers, and then the aggregator of the aggregator, and so on. The problem with a world in which the aggregators always win is it's what philosophers would call an infinite regression, right? So if you have an aggregator, you can aggregate the aggregator and then aggregate the meta-aggregator and so on and so on and so on. So in that case, it's sort of like Google always wins, right? We all worry about Amazon, but Amazon's got to look over its shoulder eventually. Amazon can't always be the aggregator. Something can so easily just aggregate it. You know, the trick with selling books, and this book I decided to do for a whole bunch of reasons, not the least of which was the day that I had my first publicity meeting at my publisher. Before this, there were people weeping in the hallway, packing their box. It was one of the days that they let, you know, a third of the staff go of the big, it was just like so heartbreaking. I wanted to get kind of, I wanted to touch the water again and be reborn. And so I did this book published independently with Orr Books. And the motto is really the same one that he's talking about. Let's sell to a few people with a higher markup, and let's not deal with Amazon and BNN and all that stuff. I mean, it's slightly different from what my take would be. My personal preference would be, let's go by any means necessary. In other words, instead of doing Amazon regular, let's do fulfillment by demand, where they're only going to take 15% instead of 55%. In other words, the beauty of being indie is we're like the rats after the apocalypse, right? We can do anything we want. There are no rules. Just take no prisoners. Take everything. Exploit every system. Have no principles other than let's get this book out. You know, let's just do the thing that works for us right now and see if models change. You know, the thing we're looking at, on the one hand, is a book industry that is incompatible with the net, right? The net is a decentralized distribution medium, and what we're trying to do is to support highly centralized corporations and their debt structures with it, right? And that doesn't actually work. To get people to support what it is he's talking about and what we're talking about, this independent book distribution scheme, we have to get people, after I'm on Brian Lehrer, after I'm on NPR, why are they going to go into their Google search for my book instead of the Amazon search? How do we get them to go to the Google search to find my book at the publisher and then buy it with PayPal or the same credit card, as opposed to being so habituated to Amazon to go buy it there and then try to get Kindle people or Amazon Prime people up there when they've already paid their $70 to get their free shipping for the rest of the year. It's really hard to get them up to the Google, but Google's working on it. It could happen. We could move up to there. What it will take, and this is what I actually want to talk about, what it will take is a shift in the way people are anchored on these technologies. And that's something that's actually underway. By anchored, I almost mean the neurolinguistic programming, sort of psychological anchor. The way they relate to this technology has to change, right? So in terms of biases, and this is all I really care about is that you get, is that if you look at technologies in terms of their biases, everything becomes clear. In terms of the biases, what happened to the book industry over the last 20 years? First thing was the keyboard, right? The keyboard, the computer keyboard, we keep forgetting. The computer keyboard made it easy for everybody to do writer-like things, right? The keyboard, as opposed to the Smith Corona, the keyboard made it easy for everybody to write words on screens, right? So everybody wrote. So the bias of computing technology is towards the production of text, whereas the bias of the Smith Corona was against the production of text, right? It was hard. You'd have to go, who's going to deal? I used to type other people's papers in college, right? Because there was such a barrier to entry to the production of text. Second one is this distribution, right? The net is biased towards distribution. Think of the difference between using a standard camera and using a digital camera. A digital camera, every photo you make is sort of automatically distributed everywhere. The bias is different than the scarcity model of going to Photomat with your film and can you get 2 prints? 2 prints. How's that going to go out to the world? That's not going to be on your Flickr or your Facebook. The question of the bookstore, which relates to that. What is the future of the bookstore? The future of the bookstore is the past of the bookstore. The present bookstore insanity, the sort of megastore Barnes & Noble thing, the giant borders, that's not normal bookstoreness, right? That's fake bad bookstoreness. When you were kids, where did you buy books? Did you go, Brentano's was the big boy, right? And because they had like a second floor, or there was the B. Dalton over there. And that was a major city, right? There were little bookstores. It was scaled. You had a bookstore in your town, like the Pet Shop, right? Now there's Petco, right? There's this temporary period where everything scaled up to these giant sort of big box things. The big box thing is over. It's over, or it's ending. Blockbuster down 15% in the last day. Why? Aggregators get aggregated. Right? And eventually that bifurcates to the point where you've got the meta aggregate. You'll have Walmart and Amazon on the one hand, and then a zillion beautiful little stores on the other. It will happen. The third thing that changed the book industry that we don't like to acknowledge is BookScan. Right? BookScan is a writer's nightmare. BookScan, like much of the net, just like click-through, generates a kind of accountability that is actually counterproductive to business, right? Banks are not accountable to the present. Banks are only accountable to the imagined future, right, of investment. If you make banks accountable to the present, the entire nation goes bankrupt, right? We know that. So BookScan basically removes speculation from the book industry. And it makes me as valuable, well, what happened on BookScan? Orbooks probably isn't even, and the other independent guy, he's probably not even on BookScan at this point, which is kind of fun. But BookScan creates an accountability to the present, to the bottom line present, that actually killed the whole thing. When there were a few enough of us doing this, it didn't matter so much. You could kind of, you could sort of, like a movie studio can fund that Woody Allen film that just about breaks even in order to then do that. But you just kind of, it was all a lot of movable parts. We don't have those movable parts now that we're in an Excel spreadsheet that's fed by BookScan, which is so tilted towards what? If you want to do well on BookScan, you want to do well in BookScan type stores, then you've got to push back through BNN and back through all the traditional marketing. So BookScan was a biggie. The fourth is P2P. Of course, P2P distribution and possibilities, the ability for me to sell something to you without anybody in the middle. Interesting thing, I didn't sell nearly this many books. There were 250,000 downloads of my book Life Inc. on BitTorrents. Speaking about peer-to-peer. And who's going to download a book unless they're actually going to read it? They're going to bother torrenting a book. 250,000.